Great. All right. So I'm not sure if people know what the Burning Man project was. How many people have a sense of what it was? Okay. All right. That's not very many people. All right. So let me walk you through what the project was all about. First of all, the conceptual framework is just brilliant. So Primavera de Filippi, who has been working with the Ethereum community for quite some time, had this idea where you could think of certain kinds of artifacts as divided into phenomic part, so the artifact, a particular concrete artifact in the world. So I'm making a distinction between phenome and genome. So the phenome might be like a sculpture or a painting or a song, something that you can experience tangibly, like you can hear it or you can touch it or you can see it, right? So that would be the phenomic aspect of the entity, and then a genomic aspect of the entity, which would describe how that entity would evolve over time in relation to some community. So you could imagine, for example, a song could begin with a certain number of verses and a certain number of choruses and a bridge. That's a simple song structure. But there would be a new version of that song in which maybe one of the choruses was somehow changed. It might be modulated from a major key to the relative minor or something like that. Okay, so you have another version of the song, and the relationship between the new version, which is another phenome, right, would be a smart contract, which was governing the interaction of the community, which was making decisions about which versions it liked versus which versions it didn't like. Okay, so the simplest thing would be some kind of voting app. So, for example, again, in the case of the song, you might have the community might say, okay, well, this is our song, right? This is the song that best reflects this community, and now we want to move over to a new version of our song. So the community all votes on different proposals for a new version of our song, right? And then a smart contract would collect the votes amongst the different possible proposals, and the money collected from the voting would fund the recording of the next song. Does that make sense? So this is a very general idea. So you have smart contract as genetic material that's controlling the evolution of something that lives in the world. And which is a mind-blowing idea. Yes? This is pretty awesome, pretty crazy, cool idea. And Primavera instantiated it for sculpture, and for a particular sculpture, which she called plantoid. Okay? So she began with some pretty steampunk sculptures, which she did herself in collaboration with some other folks. So some pretty steampunk sculptures of plants. They were life-size. And then she had a smart contract associated with that sculpture, which was collecting the next iteration of the plantoid design. It turns out that one of the iterations of the plantoid design, one of the most recent iterations of the plantoid design, which is being controlled by this smart contract, had sensors in it. Okay, so these were heat and light sensitive sensors, and then that data was collected and brought to algorithms which were on Raspberry Pi. Yes? Hey, Patrick, come on up. Come on up. You were at Burning Man, so you can talk about your experience. You can share your experience. classified as IoT.
Since you have those sensors on there.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thought, but it's being used in a different way.
Yeah.
It's being used in a different way.
And you use genetic algorithms and stuff?
So I'll get into exactly the algorithms we use. So what would happen is the sensor data was collected and streamed to a Raspberry Pi, or pooled at a Raspberry Pi, and then there was a daytime algorithm and a nighttime algorithm, and the nighttime algorithm produced kind of dance music, I guess, is the one way to describe it. Sort of, how would you describe it, Patrick?
Dance music is a good way of putting it, yeah.
Was there a light show corresponding with it as well as the music?
Yeah, there was a light show, yeah, it's another. I didn't see that part, to be honest.
Okay, then don't worry about it. Don't worry. Just report on what you actually saw. Nick, if you got stuff. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, no worries. Okay, I can ramble on forever. Okay, so the other thing that so in the nighttime there was an algorithm which was converting the sensor data into kind of groovy dance music, and in the daytime there was a different algorithm, and Kayvon was responsible for implementing this algorithm. I'm just going to describe the algorithm to you, and I'll be honest, I think this is super cool because it also follows a genetic model.
Sorry, you cannot hear you. The people in the stream cannot hear you without microphone.
Is there perfect? Hello, can you hear me now? Okay, great. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Okay, I'm not going to repeat what I said. So that part will forever be a mystery. Okay, so the daytime algorithm works like this. So how many people here know what a transcendental number is? Awesome, there's one person in the room. Okay, so between you and I, we have enough knowledge to share with everyone. Okay, so we just have to hold the vibration and it will disseminate out through everyone. So a transcendental number is it's not rational. It can't be represented as a ratio. And it's not the solution of an algebraic equation, right? So you're not going to find it as a root or a combination of roots via sums or products, things like that. So probably everybody has heard of the number pi. So pi is a transcendental number. Probably a lot of you have heard of the number e. Right, and E is an important number when we talk about Newton's calculus, but it's also transcendental, and it has an interesting property, which is the decimal expansion enjoys a certain complexity. Like, so you can't represent the stream of digits as a finite automata, as a simple finite automata. So there's a lot of complexity in the stream of digits. And a lot of people have thought, well, if that's such an interesting source of complexity or entropy, couldn't we turn that into music? So there have been a lot of attempts to kind of turn pi or E or things like that into music. But people have kind of missed some obvious things. So I'm going to describe how to recover some of the low-hanging, obvious stuff. And that's what Kayvon implemented. Okay, so from our perspective, we're just going to treat these transcendental numbers as sources of infinite streams of digits. And we're going to know that these sources of infinite streams of digits have a certain complexity. Right, so they can't be reduced into simple patterns. right? So that's really all they are from our perspective. 3.1415, blah, 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 blah. That's just a source of an infinite supply of information. Now, if you will, imagine a ribbon like this. That's our infinite stream of digits. And what we'd like is for that ribbon to somehow be related to an infinite supply of musical information. Okay, so now let's talk about the components of musical information. What goes into just one note? Bong. What goes into a single note? Well, at a minimum, there is pitch information, but there's not just pitch, there's also duration. So when you're reading sheet music, right, what sheet music is providing to you at a minimum, it's providing a lot more information, but at a minimum, those little dots and lines on the page is providing a relatively dense, relatively compact way of getting pitch and duration information, right? So where your little dot is on the staff, whether it's in a line or a space or above the main staff or below the main staff, is giving you pitch information. So its elevation is giving you pitch information. And then whether the dot is filled in or not, and whether it has a stem or not, and whether it has a flag or not, is giving you duration information. So imagine, if you will, that I've actually got, one stream of musical information that is giving me pitch. So it would be a stream of elevations, okay? And I have another stream of information that's giving me duration. Now, the important thing is that these are infinite streams. Infinity is really fun. It's really crazy. Another piece of the puzzle is, it turns out that, I think it was the mid-'80s, John Conway and a bunch of cryptographers and mathematicians found something called the Spigot Algorithm, which could be applied to transcendental numbers to just give you the stream, right? And it could give you the stream in any base. So probably you're all familiar with the idea of writing numbers in different bases, right? So we can write it in binary, just zeros and ones are the only digits that show up. We can write it in hexadecimal, so zeros, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, right? Those are all of our digits, right? Or base 10, just 0 through 9, right? So we have the freedom within the Spigot algorithm to write these transcendental numbers in whatever base we want. So for pitch information, if you analyze most pop songs, they stay within about a 3-octave range. Okay? So not too high, not too low. And that really has to do with limitations of voice, of the human voice. That's really what it's about, plus sort of standard instrumentation, right? So, bass, guitar, piano, saxophone, that kind of thing. That's going to give you this kind of bound on the range of pitch information. So you could take a number like pi and rewrite it in base 22. So why base 22? 3 octaves, 7 diatonic pitches per octave, so that's 21. And then music doesn't just happen out of constant it also needs silence, which in Western classical notation, that's represented as a rest. I am always moved by Robert Fripp's idea that music is the cup that holds the wine of silence. But you certainly would like an explicit representation of momentary silence, out of which our source of musical information arises. So, 21 pitches plus silence, that's 22. So, if we want an infinite stream of pitch information, that infinite stream of pitch information could come from a transcendental number being generated by a Spigot algorithm that's giving you base 22 representation of that transcendental number. So that gives us a supply of pitch information. And again, I'm really asking you to visualize this as a ribbon going off this way. Now I'm going to flip over to this side, and and we can do the same thing for duration. So let's say on that side we use pi, written in base 22, to give us this infinite stream of pitch information. Over here we'll use E, and we'll write it in base 5. Why base 5? Whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note. And it turns out that most pop music kind of has that much rhythmic variation in it. There's roughly that amount of duration with, so you maybe have the hi-hat clicking along the 16th notes, and you have the bass drum, handing out maybe half notes or quarter notes or whole notes, things like that. And that gives you a sense of the rhythmic variation. So if we took E and we wrote it in base 5, we now have an infinite stream of duration information. So now I'm gonna stand with my back to you. I've got my duration information and my pitch information, and until they meet, I got nothing. I got no sound, right? But when they meet, what's going to happen? So I take this position in the stream of pitch information, and I have it meet up with that position in the duration information. Now I've got a note, right? And I can take these streams and I can zip them together. Yeah? Are you following along? Can you see the picture in your mind? They start zipping, and when they zip, it's literally like two halves of a DNA strand, right? When they start zipping together, then you get music, right? So that's the algorithm that Kayvon implemented. So he's getting the sensor data, right? And the sensor data is providing information into some operations that we can do on these streams. So since they're streams, since there are these ribbons, there's some basic operations we can do on ribbons. And I just described one of them. Like if imagine, they're flowing out this way for me, and I go, right? And they start zipping. This makes sense? They start zipping along, and so the zip operation could be invoked by sensor data. And then I could stop the zipping. Don't zip anymore. Okay? So sensor data could instruct my algorithm to not zip anymore, right? So that would stop the music, basically. Now, I could also do something else, which is, it's a ribbon. It's an infinite ribbon. That means I have infinite depth along either one of those ribbons. So I could take this ribbon like a roll of toilet paper and I could yank it, right? And that would advance it deeper into the stream, right? And so now where pitch and duration line up has shifted, right? They're not lining up in the same place, so the melody that's being generated would be completely different, right? And I can do this independently along the pitch axis as I can along the duration axis. Okay, so I have yanking this way and I have yanking this way, right? And so that's another pair of operations that I can use to influence the melody that's coming out of this stream of information. Okay? There's one other operation that I can do. Again, think physically. Got my two strings in my hand, I can go. So what was pitch becomes duration. And what was duration becomes pitch. So I rewrite E in base 22, and I write pi in base 5, right? And I can do that as much as I want. And because I have a Spigot algorithm, it just works efficiently. Okay, so what we do is we take the stream of sensor data, so people are walking up around the sculpture, and they notice, oh, if I put my hand over here and cast a shadow, then things change. Why? Because the sensor data is now not receiving the same amount of light, right? So that generates a different data stream. And those different operations correspond to the different operations we can do on these streams, which then is going to change the music being generated. That's cool, yeah? That's pretty awesome. And so that's what Kayvon implemented, and that was the daytime music. So it's going to be a lot stranger, a lot weirder. You can make it as mellifluous as you want. So instead of doing diatonic scales, which is base 22, you could do, hey, don't scoot out. I was really hoping you would talk about your experience of it. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. So you could write it in base 16, so hexadecimal. Why? 3 octaves of pentatonic scale plus a rest. Okay, and pentatonic scales, it's impossible to play melodies that don't sound good. Pentatonic is all, that's why they make wind chimes out of pentatonic scales. Right, so if you've ever walked around one of those metal tubular wind chimes, right? Those are tuned in pentatonic scales more often than not, and that's because the random or aleatoric sounding of the chimes that's caused by the wind is mellifluous. You don't get any cacophony or dissonance because of the pitches. So you can make this as mellifluous or as challenging as you want. You could also go the other direction. So you could put in chromatic scales instead of diatonic or pentatonic scales. Anyway, so that's what was our piece. Now how is this related to RChain? So Kayvon wrote the Spigot algorithm and the music generation at the Scala layer and then poked those through into a smart contract. Okay? So the smart contract interfaced with this stream of incoming data and the infinite stream. So there's a stream of data coming from the sensor array, and there's a stream of data coming from our transcendental numbers. And so the Roland contract is what hooked those two together in terms of interpreting the sensor data as operations on our two interacting streams. Okay, so that's what the smart contract does. And that was deployed on a Raspberry Pi. Okay, because the Raspberry Pi was what was running locally. There's no internet in Burning Man, right? Did I get that right?
Once it starts. Once it started, the one cell tower was overloaded.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So I've kind of given you the very head-centered a description of what this was about. I can also tell you just a little bit of the why, and then I'd like to turn it over to Patrick to give us an experiential account of what you saw, what you experienced. So the why of this, why would we do this? Well, first of all, just because it's friggin' cool, because we can. It is really, really fun to do this kind of stuff. But there's another reason. I don't know how many people have read Stealing Fire. Stealing Fire talks a lot about some of the concepts that we talk about, which is the development of collective intelligence. And they have a whole chapter devoted to Burning Man and what Burning Man is, as a culture, as a movement, is doing to help us understand collective intelligence, which is near and dear to the co-op's heart. Right? The co-op needs to, the co-op is all about the governance of this massively cool public utility, which is RChain, right? And so we want to learn from every culture we can that has made significant inroads into developing collective intelligence. But even more practically, one of the things that's pointed out in Stealing Fire is when Sergey and Larry, the Google guys, were up against the wall because they were required to select a CEO, right? So the board had said, look, you guys are brilliant, but you need a CEO to run your company, and you need to select one. They'd spent almost a year combing through exceptionally well-qualified candidates, but they just couldn't come up with a criteria that would boil one to the top. Well, we know which one came to the top. That was Eric Schmidt. And you know what the deciding factor was? He was a burner. I kid you not. Burning Man is the mecca for Silicon Valley. If you want to influence thought leadership in Silicon Valley, you have a presence in Burning Man. And if you want to influence the thought leadership in Silicon Valley, you have a super cool, awesome camp and demonstration at Burning Man. And I hope that I've given you some taste of why the Plantoid Project is so cool. There's so many interesting concepts that are happening, right? Remember, the Plantoid idea is genome and phenome in terms of smart contract and physical entity, right? And then the daytime music was also independently, like Primavera and I, we came up with these ideas completely independently, and then chance just brought us together, and I described what I was talking about, and she was like, well, that's really cool, because I really would like to use something exactly like that in Plantoid. And again, it's very much like a genetic approach, right? If you think about it, think about those two streams as zipping the two halves of a DNA strand together. Then all of the operations that I described are very close to genetic operations. When you talk about genetic manipulation, those operations are just like that. And in fact, you could imagine a whole cloud service, which is one of the things that I'm interested in doing, which would allow people to manipulate music in just this way. So they have these infinite streams, they start zipping them, they hear something they really like, they snip, and that goes up into a cloud like, I don't know, maybe a blockchain. So this little snippet of melodic material that can be unzipped into pitch and duration information. And now imagine you have a giant pool of these little melodies that various communities have selected as somehow being compelling. Well, now guess what? You can do crossover. You can do standard genetic reproduction. I have, I'm going to put the mic down, so maybe I'll stand here, and then I'll turn it over to these guys. So I have two melodic snippets, each one of which is pairs of strands. Like, picture this in your mind, pairs of strands, okay? Now I can do exactly what we do with genetic reproduction. I can split them apart and split them apart, and I can take the pitch information from the mother and the duration information from the father and get a new melody. And I can take the duration information from the mother and the pitch information from the father, stitch them together, and get a new melody. Is this making sense? You guys following what I'm saying? So now, literally, you have this genetic engine to generate fresh new melodies. Right? And this all comes out of this community interaction with data that has existed from before the dawn of time. Oh, sorry. All right. So this all comes out of a community interaction, human interaction with data that has existed before the dawn of time. Pi was there before there was a Big Bang. E was there in whatever realm we experience in mathematics. And again, think about this for a minute. Math is one of those crazy, crazy human experiences, right? If I close my eyes, you all disappeared. You're gone. If I walk out of this room, you're more gone than before, okay? But if I close my eyes, the number 3 is still with me. My direct experience of the number 3 is still present. No matter where I go, like I'm in this room, I have a direct experience of the number 3. If I get on a plane and I'm flying at 35,000 feet, I still have a direct experience of number 3. If I go diving, I'm down at 150 feet below the surface, I still have a direct experience of the number 3. There's something very fascinating about the human experience of mathematics. And what we're describing with this musical system is this interaction between us as a human community and the mathematical experience which stretches out before the dawn of time, right? And so that is this kind of cool idea that we were trying to plant at Burning Man. So now let's turn it over and give it to Nick and Patrick, and maybe they can give a sense of what they experienced.
Okay, so what you're going to watch is something that's very extremely rough. I'm not sure what, if anything, we're going to hear because I have no idea about the setup. What's up? Yep. Sorry? No, not really. we can. It might play through HDMI, yeah.
No, we don't. HDMI is going to the projector, not to the loudspeakers.
Right.
This one's here. This one's the loudspeakers.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm supposed to be somewhere before.
I still don't know what, if anything, we're going to hear just because of the way it was recorded. We may have been recording audio on something different. Also, it may stutter, so we'll see. So, this is it at daytime, obviously. Just
So these are pretty cool sculptures, yeah?
yeah. Yeah, so when we first got there, they were still sort of getting everything working. We were able to go to the first bit of it and not the end. So at this point in time, they weren't actually playing music.
Want to get a
That's
shot
just
this way?
So then we shot a time lapse of the sunset. Some people were getting married, I guess. So that's what that is. It's meant to be sped up, but it's not. Okay. And then this is what it looks like at night. So Okay, so yeah, I think this clip doesn't have sound, but here in a second we'll have it for a little bit. Oops. Okay. Woo. There you go. Sorry, I'm just letting it buffer. That's all I had at this time, but and it was mainly skipping like that because of something in this program, but it was actually quite cool. Apparently, all of the chain link structure all of that is sensors pretty much on the sides and on the front, and then I think even the big globes are. I'm not quite sure about that, but they definitely had proximity sensors and light sensors and all of that. It's pretty cool.
Awesome, thank you. Patrick, do you want to speak to your experience? Just say a few words.
Yeah, sure. I didn't experience this part firsthand, but I can speak to Burning Man in general.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so thank you for that invite, by the way. Show of hands, has anybody been to Burning Man this year or before? Okay, cool. So you guys get the picture. I would definitely encourage everybody to go. And in particular, if you're fascinated by like the properties of autonomous organization and emergent like expression of a group, I think that Burning Man is probably the largest and most successful experiment in that. Some of besides like the awesome partying and the lights and like the dancing nonstop, some of the things that like profoundly stuck out to me were the principles applied very directly. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but there's one in particular that is pointing out to me right now, and there's this idea of MOOP, which is called matter out of place, and that's essentially garbage on the ground. And there's this rule that if you see it, it's yours, and you should pick it up and take it away. And that is an applied principle of immediacy. That principle in itself was so prominent in Burning Man that I don't know if I can ever be the same, honestly, because of it. So I went not only in we went before for the build weeks. So what I wasn't aware of or didn't expect essentially was that not only do you have to help build these monumental camps and stuff, like obviously it doesn't get there without work, but in order to like participate in the camp, you have to participate in shifts, help out, volunteer in some sort of capacity. That never felt like work. And I think this speaks to like an idea that Greg always reinforces, and I experienced it very directly, and that's there is no work if you can cultivate a sense of playfulness. Like when we were doing the dishes, there was like a Congo line of dancing. While waiting in line, everybody was giving back rubs, or there was sandstorms, and as the sandstorms would just roll over, immediately people would just start to act and react to like, oh, anything that can blow out of the way, get it and fix it and stow it away, wipe up afterwards, and then get back to celebrating. So I would encourage everybody to, especially if you're interested in autonomous organizations, look at the principles that Burning Man are like surrounded by. There's 10 of them. One of them is radical inclusion, immediacy, radical self-expression, and like study those and try to experience those as best as you can. Because I think it's a massive step towards what we're trying to do in cultivating play and new forms of organization in urban society. We were with Camp Decentral, which was like the prominent blockchain camp, and I got to meet and network with and make friends with a lot of really awesome and innovative people. So I'm super grateful for the invite, and that's like my couple words. I definitely go.
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, you touched on some things that I really think we need to touch on again and again and again and again and again. But just to close it out, are there any questions from this group? Like, I'd love to hear, even if it's not a question, why are you in this room? What brought you to this particular room today? Why this track? Why this presentation? Anyone? Is this one live?
Yeah, so I like a lot about what you said about emergent intelligence, collective intelligence. That's a big part of what draws me to RChain and a lot of these blockchain 2.0 platforms, is that I see, I'm not entirely sure where I'm referencing this from, but consciousness, I think, is an emergent property of connected systems. So by building these systems, I think there's an associated consciousness with them in the same way that there is with social groups. And so, I mean, the title RChain at Burning Man being the local burns in Europe, the phenomena that I've seen there and the collective consciousness that you can be a part of is tangible. So the title really drew me. And then also just to speak to what the project you described, these transcendental numbers, like building frameworks through which we can access knowledge that is as old as you say, combining in a way, I mean, in the Pythagorean tradition, numbers were considered deities in a sense. And so this knowledge, transcendental, like how can we build tools to enable us to experience directly this knowledge that is beyond us in many ways? And yeah, so I thought the talk was brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Were you at Burning Man?
Same shirt.
Is that why you're here? Because you... Okay, all right. Okay, you got some of the taste? I'm sure our CFO is sitting here, and she's probably wondering, like, why the hell did we spend all this money on sculptures and crazy music algorithms and Burning Man? Yeah, so here's a...
You're not the only blockchain team doing so.
So your question is, why did I come to this and not something else? So I run an arts organisation called Furtherfield, and we showed the original Plantoid in a public park in North London 2 years ago now. And Plantoid remains one of my, there's lots of blockchain art out there, and lots of it doing really interesting stuff. But still, although the Plantoid is one of the earliest ones, and it's thinking about a kind of evolutionary hooking together of autonomous machine and human evolution. I just think it's really interesting, and it gives a really great way to have people think about what the potential impact of this technology is.
Cool. There's someone out.
Yeah, so I'm Pamir from Libertas Capital. So we came to this particular session because I guess at a more prosaic level, part of the reason I wanted to attend this developer conference was because I wanted to understand what could make RChain win versus a lot of the other smart contract platforms that are out there, and there are many of them out there now. And I think a lot of what's going to make a next generation smart contract platform win is the intangibles. It's not so much going to be features or transactional performance or any of its technical merits, as I think those technical merits to some extent are Well, I think there are a lot of very good platforms out there now, but I think the more intangible and more cultural aspects of a community around these projects is what's going to make them win, and that's why I thought it'd be interesting to attend this session.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So I think we're done. I think we're ended with this track. I really want to thank everyone for coming, and I encourage you all to talk to each other. I mean, for some reason you self-selected to be in this room, so find out with one other person what that self-selection was, right? And maybe there's something in that connection that's just for you. Yeah.